Hey everybody, thanks for joining me today. This is Danny Barker with eXp Realty here in San Diego, California. My niche is that I meet with veterans from throughout the United States. We strategize on what their next purchases are going to be. If it does include a sale, we'll do the sale too. But then I link them up with the well-performing realtors in their market, and they get to work and they get their wealth building going. So, with that being said, I want to talk about something that will be important to you 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? First, let's talk about capital gains. When you buy a property for 250,000 and then years later you sell it for 500,000, well, there's a $250,000 gain there that the federal and the state governments may want a piece of, right? And there's one exemption that exempts up to 250,000 for an individual and up to 500,000 for a married couple per year, that allows for you to sell your property, take that gain, and don't pay capital gains on it, right? So the way you do that is you live in it 2 out of the last 5 years. Everybody knows that. Every realtor knows that. Now, let me tell you what less than 0.1% of realtors know, even the veterans, because I myself was a real estate agent for about 3 or 4 years before it dawned on me that this thing was in existence. When you take the federal capital gains requirement in there, and it talks about living in the property for 2 out of the last 5 years so that then you can have this exemption, right? In there, it talks about how if you're active duty when you make the purchase, that it's not 2 out of 5, it's 2 out of 15. And you have to get the sale done within 3 years of you exiting the military. So what does this mean? Well, this means this. I just met with a young man going to buy a property in Minot here at his 10-year mark in the military. If he lives in that property for 2 years and then has to move away to his next duty station and he puts renters in it for that following 8 years, well, for the first 3 years, and then he retires at his 20-year mark and now he's out, right? He has that first 3 years to execute proving that he lived in the property for 2 out of the last 15 years and take up to 250,000 as an individual and up to 500,000 as a married couple. So if he buys this property for $250,000 and for some reason it goes up to $750,000, he can literally sell that thing for tax-free when it comes to the federal cap gains on that regard, and save himself just a bucket of money, right? So he's talking about, like, I don't know how long I'm going to be stationed here at any time. The Air Force can just tell me that, hey, it's time for you to go to your next duty station. A promotion might trigger something like that. So hopefully he'll be able to get his 2 years in there. That way he can rest assured when he retires and eventually moves back to the best state in all of the country, right? California, if you didn't know the answer, he can take that big lump sum of money, selling the property for what it's worth, and not have to worry about paying the feds that percentage on there. So I just wanted to share that with you. If you have any questions about like what else that you can do with selling a property that you haven't lived in the last 2 to 5 years or 2 of 15, if you bought it on active duty, there's a 1031 exchange. In the 1031 exchange, what happens is you hire a middleman that is certified to conduct the 1031 exchange. They set up an account. When the sale happens, all of the proceeds go into that account, and you have 45 days to identify up to 5 options that you're going to execute the purchase on, and then you have that 180 days to execute one of those 5 purchases. I do recommend that in one of those 5 spots, you would provide a real estate investment trust. That way, if the 4 properties end up selling to other people because you couldn't work it out, that you wouldn't have to just say, oh, well, I failed, right? So if you're approaching that 45 day mark, you need to go ahead and add a real estate investment trust to that list. That way you have a safe place to park it. Now, is it free? Absolutely not. For the real estate and for the REITs, we'll call them REITs. For the REITs, a lot of well-performing investors use them, and a lot of well-performing investors won't touch them. And the ones that won't touch them mostly refer to how expensive it is to go into a REIT and how expensive it is and how long it takes to get the money out of the REIT. Well, what is a REIT? I suggest that you go Google it, REIT. There's all kinds of REITs doing all kinds of things. It's essentially you giving your money over to the professionals, and they go out and they invest it in real estate. So it is a like investment. You could literally sell a condo, take the money, put it into a REIT, and then they're over there building an apartment in some of them, right? And in other ones, they own the apartment, they're renting it out. There's just all kinds of enters and exits available out there. Really, really good tool to use later in life. I've got my neighbors that are like 70 something years old. There's another guy that owns 58. Like my neighbors own 17 properties. There's another guy that I'm in talks with that he owns 58 properties. That he's not real keen on managing these forever and ever and ever. So when the day comes, they can always sell and then take all of their proceeds and put it into a REIT. And the REIT does, some REITs are structured to have a monthly income. So you're not sacrificing all of your passive income at that point, but what you are doing is you're removing yourself from that steward role. So no longer are you the steward of these 17 or these 58 properties. You're now completely hands off. So with those types of investors, they might actually prefer that because they still get a monthly income, they still hold something of value, and they didn't have to shell out a whole lot of money for taxes. Another thing that happens too, and some people will help you sell your house and you didn't realize that it's about to affect your Social Security income. So I have had clients that have sold a property and said, okay, I'll go ahead and pay the capital gains and take this as an income. And when they did, it affected the next year or two of their benefits from the government. And obviously, materializing a very healthy amount of money can make it seem like they can afford it. They no longer need it. They just say that, yeah, okay, we got all these conservative arguments to make over here, but at the end of the day, these are retired people that do not have trade your time for money income anymore. The property that they sold was no longer making them income. So what they needed was to catch back up. So they sold this property and they paid off a bunch of stuff, right? And they paid to get ahead on a bunch of stuff. And then they realized, oh, shoot, we spent all that money. And here we are having to take a lower income from Social Security now because of it. I just want you guys to make sure that you understand that the best person to talk to about your taxes and about your implications is not going to be your realtor. So like, I'm not the best person to talk to you. I'm just giving you like, hey, if you're in this scenario, you need to go find a professional to talk to. I would talk to your CPA, and I would also talk to whoever liaison you have at whatever entitlement you have. So, Social Security office, go talk to them and say, hey, if I were to sell this property and I were to materialize this money and it was qualifying income, what's going to happen to my benefit? And that way you can plan for it, right? Because obviously if you take a $300,000 income this year by selling a property, but next year you're not selling anything, then you don't have to worry about it affecting your income for the next year. And the Social Security admin will help you work through that if that is the way that you have to go on your exit. Another thing is that, we're trying to build generational wealth. A lot of people think that I'm going to collect all these properties and then I'm going to hand these properties down to my children. And I'll tell you right now that that's kind of like a pipe dream. In order for it to execute that way, you're going to have to train your children how to be a good steward to these properties, right? So obviously, if you are approaching that retirement, that end of life era, and you move your stuff into a REIT, it's a lot easier for your children to manage the REIT because there's literally nothing that they have to do in management wise, right? So that's something to think about too. You might have built this glorious portfolio and it's performing very well for you the way that you conduct it. But if you hand it down to your child, are they going to take care of it the way that you are? Are they going to have the successes that you are? If you're worried at all about that, it might make sense to go ahead and sell everything, park all the money in a REIT, enjoy the rest of your life with the income from the REIT, and then you still have something of great value to hand down to the next generation. So, all right, I hope this helps. I know I touched on a couple of subjects. If you want to have an in-depth discussion of anything, you can go to DannyBarkerRealtor.com, put in your information. I'll be in contact with you quickly, and we can even set up a Zoom call. All right, thanks, guys. Appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.